The cage in the corner of the alien market was loud and full of strange smells. Voices shouted in different languages, and traders waved their hands to pull buyers closer. Daniel moved slowly through the crowd, keeping one hand on his bag. He was here for ship parts, nothing more, but his eyes kept drifting to the darker corners of the market. Places where people didn't want to look. Places where the forgotten and unwanted were kept. That was when he saw it. A small cage pushed against a broken wall, half covered with a dirty cloth. It was so small that Daniel first thought it was for some kind of pet, but when he moved closer, he froze inside. Curled up like a frightened animal was a tiny alien girl. She had pale skin, messy hair that looked like silver threads, and big eyes that stared at him without blinking. Her arms hugged her knees tightly, and her bare feet were scratched and dirty. Daniel looked around, expecting someone to be watching her. A trader stood nearby, leaning on a crate and chewing something that smelled bitter. That one. The trader laughed when Daniel pointed to the cage. "She's worthless," the man said with a wave of his hand. "Too small, too weak, can't work, can't be trained. We're throwing her out soon." Daniel frowned. "Throwing her out?" he asked, his voice low. The trader smirked. "You think anyone wants her? She's just taking up space. It's a waste of food to keep her alive." The girl's eyes flicked between the two men, but she didn't speak. Her hands trembled as if she was expecting to be hit. Daniel felt something twist inside him. He had seen cruelty before, but something about this moment made his chest feel heavy. "How much?" he asked. The trader laughed again. "You want to buy her? You're crazy. Tell you what, take her for free. I'll even throw in the cage." "She's your problem now." Daniel unlocked the cage carefully. The girl flinched when the door opened, pressing herself into the far corner. "It's okay," he said softly, but he wasn't sure she understood his words. When he reached in, she didn't fight. She was light, far too light, as he lifted her into his arms. The crowd nearby began to whisper and laugh. A human buying a worthless alien girl was something they'd talk about all day. Daniel didn't care. He turned to leave, holding her close so she wouldn't fall. She stayed silent, her head resting against his chest as if she had no strength to lift it. As he moved through the crowd, he felt her small fingers curl into his shirt. It was so faint that he almost didn't notice. Then, in a voice so soft, he had to lean closer to hear. She whispered, "You smell safe." Daniel stopped walking. For a moment, the noise of the market faded. He looked down at her, but her eyes were already closing. She had passed out, her breathing slow and uneven. He tightened his hold on her and kept moving, somewhere deep. Inside, he knew this was no simple rescue. This was the start of something dangerous. But he also knew one thing. He was not going to let her go back into that cage. The first meal, Daniel carried the tiny alien girl all the way back to his ship. The market noise faded behind him, replaced by the steady hum of the docking bay. He could feel how light she was, almost weightless in his arms. It wasn't just her size. It was as if life itself had been drained from her. Every step he took, her head rested against his chest. Her breathing slow, she didn't open her eyes. Not even once. When he reached his ship, the metal doors slid open with a quiet hiss. Warm air met them, carrying the faint scent of engine oil and fresh water. Daniel moved straight to the small living space inside. He laid her gently on the padded bench. She didn't move, but her small fingers stayed curled around his sleeve until he carefully loosened them. He crouched beside her, looking at her face. She had faint marks along her neck and wrists, thin scars that spoke of restraints. Her lips were dry, and there was a tired look in her expression even as she slept. Daniel sighed, standing up. If she was going to survive, the first thing she needed was food. He went to the small galley and began heating a pot of soup. It wasn't much, just vegetables, some dried meat, and broth. But it would be warm and soft. As it cooked, the scent filled the air. Daniel noticed the girl's nose twitch slightly. A minute later, her eyes fluttered open. They were a strange color, silver mixed with pale blue, and they watched him carefully. "You're awake," Daniel said softly. She blinked, then slowly sat up. Her eyes darted to the pot on the stove, then to the door of the ship. It was as if she was already planning an escape route. Daniel took a slow step toward her, holding out a steaming bowl. "It's food," he said. "You need it?" She stared at the bowl but didn't move. Her thin arms stayed locked around her knees. "It's not poisoned," Daniel added. Trying to sound calm, still, she didn't respond. So he set the bowl down on the table beside her and stepped back. The scent of the broth filled the air between them. After a long moment, she reached out, quick and cautious, and pulled the bowl toward her. The first sip was small. Her lips touched the spoon like she was testing it. Then her eyes widened slightly. She began to eat faster. Spoon after spoon, Daniel watched her carefully. When she started swallowing too quickly, she began to cough. He moved closer, gently taking the spoon from her hand. "Slow down," he said, pouring a little water into a cup and handing it to her. She took it, still keeping her eyes on him like she expected him to snatch it back. When she finished, she set the empty bowl down and whispered something. Daniel leaned closer to hear. "You're not hurting me?" she asked, her voice trembling. The words hit him harder than he expected. "No," he said simply. "I'm not." For a moment, she seemed unsure how to react. Her fingers fidgeted with the edge of the blanket he had draped over her. Daniel opened his mouth to say more, but a sudden noise cut him off. A deep metallic thud echoed through the hull of the ship. It came again, louder this time. Someone was knocking on the outer door. Daniel's eyes narrowed. He moved toward the door's control panel, checking the small exterior camera. The feed flickered before showing the image of an alien man, tall, with dark, scaled skin and a too wide smile. Daniel recognized him instantly. It was the same trader from the market. The man tapped on the door again, this time with the butt of a weapon. Daniel glanced over his shoulder. The girl had already slipped off the bench, crouching behind it, her small hands gripping the fabric tightly. Her eyes were wide, full of fear. Daniel returned his gaze to the camera feed. He didn't open the door. Instead, he pressed the intercom button. "What do you want?" His voice came out sharper than he planned. The trader's grin widened. "I believe you have something that belongs to me," the alien said, his voice oily and smug. Daniel stayed silent, his jaw tight. "You think you can just walk out of the market with her? She's marked human. She's trouble. You don't want her," the man continued. Daniel's grip on the panel tightened. "Leave," he said, his tone cold. The trader chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "Suit yourself. But don't say I didn't warn you," he said, before turning and walking away. Daniel waited until the figure was gone before locking the doors twice over. When he turned back, the girl was still hiding. He crouched down, meeting her gaze. "It's okay," he said softly. "He's gone." But inside, Daniel knew the man's warning wasn't just talk. The trader would be back, and next time, he might not knock. The unwanted visitor, the knock, did not come again that night, but Daniel knew the silence was temporary. People like that trader never gave up easily. He had seen the greed in the man's eyes, and the way he spoke made it clear this was not over. The next morning, Daniel found the girl sitting quietly at the small table. She had wrapped herself in the blanket he had given her, her silver blue eyes following him as he moved around the galley. "Hungry?" he asked, keeping his voice gentle. She nodded once, not speaking. Daniel served her a small plate of bread and fruit. She ate slower this time, watching him between bites, as if still deciding whether to trust him. Halfway through breakfast, The ship's scanner beeped. Daniel's stomach tightened. It wasn't a distress signal or a regular transmission. It was an approach alert. Someone was coming toward his docking bay. He walked to the control panel and pulled up the camera. Feed. The screen flickered to life, and there he was, the trader from the market. Standing just outside the docking platform with two larger alien guards beside him, Daniel muttered under his breath. The girl froze, her hands gripping the edge of the table. Her breathing quickened, and her wide eyes locked on the door. "He's here again," she whispered, her voice shaking. Daniel turned to her. "Stay inside. Don't move. No matter what happens, you don't open that door." He stepped to the ship's entrance and pressed the intercom. The trader's voice came through, smooth and confident. "Morning, human. I think we started on the wrong foot yesterday," he said, smiling into the camera. Daniel didn't answer. The man continued. "Look, she doesn't belong to you. She's not even worth the trouble you're making for yourself. Hand her over, and I'll even throw in some credits for your kindness." "She's not yours," Daniel said firmly. The trader's smile faded slightly, replaced with a colder expression. "You don't understand," he said. "She's marked. Do you know what that means, human? That mark on her wrist makes her property. You keeping her is theft." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "She's not property," he replied, his voice hard. The trader leaned closer to the camera, his scaled face filling the screen. "You're making a mistake. She'll bring you nothing but danger, and when it comes, you won't survive it." Behind Daniel, the girl's small voice came again, trembling. "Don't let him take me." Her words were soft, but Daniel heard them clearly. Something in his chest tightened. "I'm not handing her over," he said through the intercom. The trader stared at him for a long moment before stepping back. His guards shifted their weight, ready for violence, but the man raised a hand to stop them. "Fine," he said finally, his voice like ice. "Enjoy your new pet while you can. She won't last the week." The feed went dark as the trader walked away. Daniel waited until the guards followed before locking every door and sealing the airlock. When he turned around, the girl was still at the table, her eyes shiny with tears she was trying to hide. He walked over and crouched down so they were at eye level. "He's gone for now," Daniel said. She nodded, but didn't look convinced. Daniel thought for a moment, then added, "I'm not going to let him take you, I promise, for the first time." Her gaze met his fully. It was cautious, but there was a flicker of something else. Maybe hope? Still? She asked. "Why?" Daniel blinked. "Because no one should live in a cage," he answered simply. She studied his face as if trying to decide whether he was telling the truth. After a moment, she looked away. Clutching the blanket tighter around her small frame, Daniel knew they couldn't stay docked much longer. If the trader was bold enough to come to his ship twice, he'd be bold enough to try something worse next time. He walked to the navigation console and began plotting a departure route, but as he worked, he kept glancing at the girl. Her small hands were still shaking. She didn't trust him completely yet, but she was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, he wouldn't hurt her. Outside, the hum of ships and voices in the docking bay continued. But inside Daniel's ship, there was a new kind of tension. One that told him the real trouble hadn't even started yet. Night terrors. The ship had been in deep space for hours. Daniel had left the busy docking bay far behind. Choosing a quiet trade route with fewer ships, he wanted distance between them. And the trader, he wanted safety. But in the back of his mind, he knew that safety was only temporary. The girl had fallen asleep early, curled under the blanket on the bench. Her breathing was soft, and her small frame was almost hidden under the fabric. Daniel sat in the pilot's chair, watching the stars drift past. For the first time since the market, the silence felt peaceful. He thought maybe she would sleep through the night, But some time later, he woke to a sound soft, broken, almost like whimpering. Daniel turned his head. The girl was no longer on the bench. She was crouched in the far corner of the room, her hands pressed over her ears, her eyes wide and unfocused. Her whole body shook like she was freezing. Daniel got up slowly, careful not to startle her. "It's okay," he said softly, taking a slow step forward, but she flinched at his voice. Her breathing was fast, too fast, and tears ran down her cheeks. "No, no, not the dark room. Please, no," she whispered, her words trembling. Daniel knelt a few feet away from her. "It's not the dark room," he said. "You're on my ship. You're safe." But she didn't seem to hear him. Her gaze was far away, trapped in some memory he couldn't see. Daniel's hands itched to pull her into safety, but he didn't want to frighten her more. "Can I sit here?" he asked, lowering himself to the floor. She blinked at him, her breathing still quick. But she gave the smallest nod. Daniel sat cross-legged beside her, leaving a bit of space. They stayed like that for a while. Her trembling slowed just a little when her voice finally came. It was so small he almost missed it. They put me in a box," she said. It was dark. No sound. Only the collar. It burned when I cried. Daniel's jaw tightened. He wanted to tell her it was over, that no one would hurt her again, but he knew words were not enough. So instead, he carefully offered his arm. "If you want, you can hold on to me until you feel better." She hesitated, staring at his arm like it was a trap. Then, slowly, she reached out and gripped his sleeve. Her small fingers clung tightly. Daniel stayed still, letting her control the moment. He could feel how cold her hands were. Gradually, her breathing steadied. Her eyes closed, and after a long time, her grip loosened. When he thought she had fallen asleep, he moved to pick her up, but her eyes opened slightly. "Don't go," she whispered. Daniel froze for a moment, then nodded. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, leaning back against the wall. She shifted closer, resting her head lightly against his side. It was a fragile kind of trust, but it was trust for the first time. She slept without jerking awake. Daniel stayed awake, watching over her. The steady rhythm of her breathing filled the small space, but just as his own eyes began to grow heavy, the ship's console lit up with a warning. Daniel's stomach tightened. He carefully eased her head onto the blanket and went to check the screen. The scanner showed a vessel on approach. It wasn't just any vessel, its signature matched the trader's ship. Daniel muttered a curse under his breath. He hadn't expected them to find him this fast. He glanced back at the girl, still sleeping, unaware of the danger outside. The trader's ship was closing in. Daniel had a choice: wake her and risk her fear spiraling again, or try to handle it without disturbing her. But deep down, he knew they might have to run again, and this time it wouldn't just be a warning knock. The chase the trader's ship was gaining on them. Daniel could see the blinking red marker on his scanner, drawing closer with each second. He adjusted the flight controls, his jaw tight. The girl was still asleep in the back, wrapped in her blanket, unaware that danger was almost on top of them. A sudden burst of static filled the cockpit speakers. Then came the trader's voice, smooth and mocking, running already human. "You didn't think I'd let you keep her, did you?" Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he cut the comms and pushed the engines harder. The hum of the ship rose, and the stars outside became long white streaks. In the back, the girl stirred at the sound. She sat up, rubbing her eyes, her silver-blue gaze drifting to the cockpit. "What's happening?" she asked, her voice still groggy. Daniel didn't want to scare her, but lying felt wrong. "They found us," he said, keeping his voice calm. "I need you to stay here and hold on to something." She hesitated, then climbed into the co-pilot seat beside him, clutching her blanket like a shield. The trader's ship appeared on the main display, a dark, sharp vessel with heavy engines. Daniel could almost feel the man's smugness from here. A warning alarm blared. Enemy weapons were locking on. "Brace," Daniel said. Just before the first shot hit, the ship shuddered violently, and the girl gasped, gripping the seat. The blast had only grazed the hull, but it was enough to shake them both. Daniel swung the ship sharply to the left. Weaving between chunks of drifting debris, the trader's ship followed, firing again. Bright streaks of plasma lit up the dark void, some passing so close that the cockpit glowed for a moment. "Can't you just go faster?" the girl asked, her voice trembling. "I'm trying," Daniel muttered, adjusting the thrusters. Another volley of fire streaked toward them. Daniel rolled the ship just in time. The shots passing harmlessly into open space. The girl stared at him, eyes wide. "You're not scared?" she asked. He gave her a quick glance. "Oh, I'm scared," he said. "But I'm not letting him take you." The trader's voice crackled through the comms again. "Last chance, human, give her up, and I'll let you live." Daniel reached over and shut the channel completely. The only sound now was the growl of the engines and the steady beeping of the targeting alerts. Up ahead, a dense asteroid field loomed. Daniel's eyes narrowed. It was dangerous. One wrong move could tear the ship apart, but it was their only chance. He pushed the throttle to maximum. The girl clung to the seat, her blanket falling. To the floor, her eyes stayed locked on him. "You can make it," she asked. Daniel smirked faintly. "Watch me." They plunged into the asteroid field. Massive rocks drifted past in slow, silent motion, some spinning, some colliding with each other in bursts of fragments. Daniel twisted and rolled the ship. Through the narrow gaps behind them, the trader's ship followed, but not as smoothly. A large asteroid scraped its side, sending a shower of debris into space. Daniel used the moment, cutting between two massive rotating stones just as they close together. The trader's ship tried to follow, but the gap narrowed too quickly. The impact rang through the void, and the trader's vessel spun out of control, drifting backward. The radar showed the red marker shrinking fast. They had escaped. Daniel slowed the engines and guided the ship into a quiet pocket of the field. The girl finally exhaled, her small shoulders relaxing a little. "You really did it," she whispered. Daniel gave a short nod. "Told you I wouldn't let him take you." For a long moment, she just stared at him. Then, without a word, she picked up her blanket, wrapped it around herself, and leaned against his arm. It wasn't much, but it was the first time she had chosen to be close to him without fear. Outside, the asteroids drifted silently in the darkness. For now, they were safe. But Daniel knew the trader wouldn't give up forever. The chase might be over, but the war for her freedom had only just begun. Her secret, the asteroid field, was quiet. Only the soft hum of the ship's systems filled the air. Daniel sat in the pilot's seat, his eyes scanning the radar for any sign of pursuit. The trader's ship had vanished from the scanners, but Daniel knew it wasn't gone forever. Beside him, the girl sat with her blanket wrapped tightly around her small frame. She had not spoken since the chase. Her gaze was fixed on the drifting rocks outside the viewport, but her thoughts were far away. After a while, Daniel turned to her. "You? All right," he asked, his voice low. She hesitated before nodding slowly. "You didn't have to do that," she murmured. Daniel frowned. "Do what?" "Risk yourself." "For me?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel leaned back in his seat. "I wasn't going to let him take you," he said simply. Her silver blue eyes finally met his, searching his face for something. "You don't understand," she said. "If they find me, they won't just take me back. They'll kill you." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Then maybe you should tell me why," he said. The girl's fingers tightened on the blanket. For a long moment, she didn't answer. Then she drew a shaky breath. "My name is Leora," she began softly. I wasn't born in the market. I lived on a small planet hidden from most trade routes." Her voice trembled, but she kept going. "My people were peaceful. We didn't fight. We didn't trade much with outsiders. We had no weapons." She paused, her eyes glistening. "One day, ships came from the sky. They weren't traders. They were hunters. They said our planet was rich with rare crystals. They didn't care about us." Her voice cracked. "They burned our villages, took those who could work, and killed the rest." Daniel felt his jaw tighten. "And you?" he asked gently. She swallowed hard. "I was taken with the others, but when they learned I was the daughter of our elder, they decided I was more valuable. They put a mark on my wrist, a mark that made me property. And they planned to sell me to the highest bidder." She pulled back the blanket, showing him her thin wrist. There, burned into her skin, was a faint, jagged symbol. Daniel stared at it for a long moment. "Why does the trader want you so badly?" he asked. Leora's gaze lowered. "Because my people's crystals. They're hidden in only one place. My family knew where, and they think I know too." Daniel exhaled slowly. "So he's not just after you. He's after your home." Leora nodded. "If he finds the crystals, he'll sell them to warlords. And they'll destroy more worlds. I can't let that happen." Silence filled the cockpit for a few moments. Daniel studied her face, seeing the weight she carried. Despite her small size, she was young. But she had already seen more cruelty than most people in a lifetime. "You've been running for a long time, haven't you?" he asked quietly. She gave a small nod. "Every time I thought I found somewhere safe, they came," she said, her voice heavy with exhaustion. Daniel's voice was steady. "Then we make sure this is the last time." Leora looked at him, startled. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Daniel said, "I'm not just going to hide you. I'm going to make sure he never comes after you again." Her eyes widened. "No one's ever said that to me before," she whispered. Daniel smirked faintly. "Then maybe you've been talking to the wrong people for the first time." A small smile touched her lips. It was faint, but it was real. She pulled the blanket tighter and leaned back in the seat. "You're strange for a human," she said softly. "Strange?" Daniel asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes," she replied. "Most humans I've met. They only help if they get something in return." Daniel's gaze returned to the stars ahead. "Maybe I just like proving people wrong," he said. Leora didn't answer, but her eyes stayed on him, as if she was memorizing his words outside. The asteroid field slowly drifted around them. For now, they were hidden. But Daniel knew they couldn't stay here forever. The traitor was still out there, and he would return, not just for her, but for whatever fortune he thought she carried in her memory. Daniel glanced at Leora again. She was staring out at the stars. But there was a new look in her eyes, something between fear and hope. Whatever happened next, Daniel knew one thing for certain. He wasn't letting her face it alone. From cage to comfort, the asteroid field slowly faded behind them as Daniel guided the ship onto a safer route. The engines hummed softly, and the air inside the cabin felt calmer than it had in days. For the first time since they had met, there was no sound of weapons, no angry voice on the comms, no rush to escape. Leora sat quietly in the co-pilot's seat, her knees pulled up under her blanket. She watched the stars slide past, her silver blue eyes reflecting their light. Daniel glanced at her now and then, noticing how much less tense her shoulders looked. She still held the blanket like a shield, but her grip had loosened. "Where are we going?" she asked softly, breaking the silence. Daniel tapped a few keys on the navigation panel. "Somewhere far," he said. "Somewhere they won't find us." She tilted her head. "Does that place exist?" Daniel smirked faintly. "If it doesn't, we'll make it." Her lips curved into the smallest smile. She leaned back, watching him work for so long. Her life had been full of people who saw her as a tool, a burden, or a prize to be traded. Daniel was different. He didn't ask for anything in return, didn't demand answers, didn't treat her like she was fragile glass, even though she sometimes felt that way inside. When the ship settled into a smooth drift, Daniel got up. "You should eat," he said. Moving to the galley, he made a warm meal, simple but filling. Leora joined him at the small table, and for the first time, she didn't keep glancing toward the door. They ate in silence at first, but it was a comfortable silence. Halfway through, she asked, "Do you think I'll ever stop feeling like I'm still in that cage?" Daniel set his fork down, meeting her gaze. "Yes," he said, firmly. "One day you'll forget what it even felt like, and until then, I'll remind you that you're free." Something in her chest shifted at those words. She didn't reply right away, but her eyes softened after dinner. Daniel showed her the small sleeping area beside his bunk. It was simple, a hammock, strung between two supports, with a soft blanket folded neatly on top. "This is yours now," he said. Leora touched the hammock as if testing if it was real, then looked at him. "It's warm," she said quietly. Daniel chuckled. "It's supposed to be." Hours later, the ship was quiet again. Daniel was lying in his bunk, half asleep, when he heard soft footsteps. He opened his eyes to see Leora standing there, still wrapped in her blanket. Her eyes were unsure, her voice even softer. "I can't sleep," she said. "The dark feels too big." Daniel sat up and moved over. "Come here," he said. She hesitated for only a moment before climbing into the space beside him. Her small frame curled up against his chest, and she let out a long, shaky breath. Daniel adjusted the blanket around them both. "You're safe here," he said quietly, for a long moment. She didn't answer. Then she whispered, "You're my safe place now." The words stayed in his mind long after her breathing slowed. He remembered the first time he had seen her, curled in that filthy cage, too weak to even lift her head. She was here, sleeping in his arms, her trust slowly growing. Daniel knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The traitor was still out there, and the galaxy was full of people who would hurt someone like her. But he also knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would never see another cage again. The ship drifted quietly through the dark, the stars passing by like silent witnesses. Inside, for the first time in a long time, Leora dreamed without fear. And Daniel, holding her close, allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had found a new beginning.